He called me worthless in front of everyone, his parents, his business partners, even our kids. And the worst part, he smiled while doing it, like it was some kind of joke. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to Daniel for 10 years. We live in Austin, Texas, with our 2 kids, Emma and Luke. From the outside, people think we're a perfect family. Daniel runs a growing business and drives nice cars. I stay home with the kids, manage the house, and make sure everything runs smoothly. People often say I'm lucky, but they don't know what it feels like behind closed doors. Daniel wasn't always cruel. When we first met, he was funny, full of dreams, and he said I made him feel grounded. I believed him. I worked while he built his company, paid bills when he couldn't, and even helped him design his first pitch deck. I stopped chasing my own career so he could chase his. I thought that's what love meant: sacrifice, teamwork, patience. But as the years went by, he changed. Success made him arrogant. Every time he got a new client, he became colder. Every argument ended with him calling me lazy or ungrateful. I told myself it was stress, that he'd come around once things settled. I was wrong. The dinner that night was supposed to be a celebration. Daniel had just signed a big deal and invited his parents and a few partners to a fancy restaurant. I spent hours getting ready, hoping he'd notice. I wanted to be the supportive wife he could be proud of. The moment we sat down, though, I could tell something was off. He was louder than usual, showing off, acting like the center of the universe. When his father praised the success of his company, Daniel laughed and said, "Yeah, well, Sarah's not exactly helping with that. She's just good at spending money." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I froze, smiling politely while my heart sank. Emma and Luke looked at me with confusion. His mother shifted awkwardly, but Daniel just kept talking. He didn't even look at me. I stayed quiet the rest of the night, my food untouched. Inside, I felt small, invisible, and angry, but not the kind of anger that explodes. It was the quiet kind that sits deep inside and waits. When we got home, he acted like nothing had happened. He kissed the kids goodnight and went to his office. I stood in the kitchen alone, hearing his words echo in my head. Worthless. It was just one word, but it broke something inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, realizing that the man I built everything around didn't see me as a partner anymore. That night, I promised myself one thing: he'd never call me worthless again. Daniel had been talking about that dinner for weeks. He said it was important, a celebration of his company's success, and a chance to impress some new business partners. He made reservations at one of the most expensive restaurants in Austin, the kind of place where the waiters spoke softly and the plates looked like art. Sarah wanted everything to be perfect. She took extra time getting ready, choosing a blue dress he once said was his favorite and tying her hair the way he liked. She hoped maybe, for once, he'd notice her again. When they arrived, Daniel immediately took charge of the table. He greeted everyone, shaking hands and joking loudly, his voice carrying across the room. Sarah smiled politely and took her seat beside him. His parents were there too, proud and glowing as they talked about how far Daniel had come. The business partners laughed along, admiring his success story. Sarah sat quietly, listening. Every now and then, she tried to join the conversation, but Daniel barely looked at her. The food came, and the conversation turned to their personal lives. One of the partners asked Sarah what she did. She smiled softly and said she mostly stayed home, taking care of the kids and helping Daniel where she could. Before she could finish, Daniel laughed. "Yeah," he said. "Sarah's great at spending money, but that's about it." The table burst into laughter. Even his parents chuckled, not knowing what to say. Sarah's heart dropped. She forced a small smile, pretending it didn't hurt, but her hands trembled under the table. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. She stared down at her plate, pushing her food around with her fork while Daniel kept talking, his voice full of pride and arrogance. She wanted to leave, but she couldn't. She sat there, listening to him brag about deals he made, connections he built, all the while knowing how much she had helped behind the scenes. She had been the one proofreading his proposals, giving him ideas when he was stuck, and comforting him when clients turned him down. But none of that mattered now. He wanted the spotlight to himself, and if he had to make her look small to feel bigger, he didn't hesitate. The dinner dragged on, but to Sarah, every minute felt like an hour. When the check came, Daniel didn't even look her way. He stood, shook hands, and let everyone out like the perfect host. Sarah followed quietly, her smile gone. The night air outside felt heavy. In the car, silence filled the space between them. Daniel hummed along to the radio as if nothing had happened. Sarah kept her eyes on the window, watching the city lights blur by. She didn't say a word. Inside her, something shifted. Not anger, not sadness, but a deep understanding that something between them had broken for good. He didn't see her anymore. Not as a wife. Not even as a person. That night, as she lay in bed beside him, she stared at the ceiling and replayed every word he said at that table. The laughter, the tone, the look on his face. And for the first time in her marriage, she didn't wonder what she had done wrong. She just wondered how long she'd been fooling herself that love still lived there. When they got home from the dinner, Sarah didn't say a word. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. Daniel went straight to his office like he always did, loosening his tie, humming to himself as if the night had gone perfectly. Sarah stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the table where their kids' drawings still sat. Her chest felt tight, but no tears came. She just sat down slowly, hands folded, her mind replaying every cruel word he had said. He had called her worthless, right there in front of people. That word hung in the air like poison. It followed her even in silence. She could still hear his laugh, the sound of other people joining in, the way no one defended her. For years, she had been his biggest supporter. She was there when he had nothing. She stayed up through the night helping him edit presentations, fixing his grammar, polishing his words so he could look professional. When he was nervous about meeting investors, she made calls to her old college contacts and helped him set up introductions. When his first idea failed, she used her own savings to rent him a tiny office so he could try again. Back then, he thanked her. He said he couldn't do it without her. But now those words meant nothing. Somewhere along the way, his gratitude had turned into pride, and pride had turned into cruelty. Sarah thought about how many times she had stepped aside, letting him shine, telling herself it was for their future. But now she saw that she had built his dream while letting her own disappear. She didn't cry that night. There was no point. She just sat in silence, breathing slowly, remembering every moment she had believed in him. Her mind started piecing things together. The way he had recently changed passwords to their accounts, how the accountant had started copying only Daniel on email, and how he avoided talking about money with her. At the time, she thought it was just business. Now she wasn't sure. Over the next few days, she kept quiet. She smiled when she had to, made breakfast for the kids, packed lunches, and went about her day like nothing had happened. But inside, she was thinking, not about revenge, but about clarity, about finally understanding the kind of man she had married. Every time Daniel laughed or bragged on the phone, she remembered how he'd looked across that dinner table, proud of his insult. It didn't hurt the same way anymore. It hardened her instead. He had taken her silence for weakness, her kindness for dependence. He didn't know that silence can also mean strength, that sometimes quiet people are the ones planning the loudest changes. That week, she didn't yell or confront him. She didn't ask why he said it or beg for an apology. She just started to watch and think, carefully, patiently. For years, she had helped him build everything. Now, she wondered what would happen if she stopped holding it up. A week before that awful dinner, something strange had happened. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, checking emails while the kids did their homework. Among them was one from their accountant. It was supposed to go to Daniel, but somehow it ended up in her inbox too. At first, she thought it was just another monthly report, the kind Daniel usually handled. But as she scrolled through the attached documents, her heart began to race. The numbers didn't make sense. The financial statements showed several large transfers, money moving from their joint accounts into new ones that she had never seen before. At first, she assumed there must be a reason, maybe a new investment or tax change. But when she looked closer, she realized something worse. Daniel had been slowly moving assets, properties, and even shares of the company into accounts listed under his name only. Her name was gone from places where it used to be. Sarah sat there in silence, rereading the same lines over and over. It felt like her chest was tightening. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, but deep down she knew it wasn't. Daniel had planned this carefully. Every month, a little more had been shifted, just enough that she wouldn't notice unless she was looking closely. She thought about confronting him right away, but something stopped her. She remembered how he handled arguments, how he'd twist her words, make her feel crazy, and turn everything around until she was the one apologizing. She didn't want to go through that again. Not this time. So instead, she took a deep breath and began saving everything. She downloaded every file, printed copies, and kept them hidden in a folder under her clothes drawer. She even forwarded the email to a private address she had once used for freelance work. Every small move she made felt dangerous, like she was walking on thin ice in her own home. That night, when Daniel came home, she acted normal. She served dinner, smiled, and asked about his day. He told her about a new contract, his tone full of confidence and pride. Watching him talk, Sarah felt a strange calm settle inside her. She wasn't scared anymore. She was learning the truth, piece by piece. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, she quietly made a call to a lawyer. The woman she spoke to was calm and kind, explaining things clearly. Sarah didn't mention Daniel's behavior or the dinner. She kept it simple. She just wanted to understand her rights, what she could protect if things went wrong. The lawyer told her to gather proof, keep quiet, and not to act until she was ready. That call changed everything. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she had control again. She realized Daniel had been planning to leave her out of everything she had helped him build. But now, she had something he didn't expect: knowledge. She didn't know when or how, but she promised herself one thing. When the time came, he would face the truth, and this time, she wouldn't be the one caught off guard. Over the next few days, Sarah played her part perfectly. To Daniel, nothing seemed different. She woke up early, packed the kids' lunches, and made his coffee just the way he liked it. She smiled when he talked, laughed at the right moments, and acted like the same quiet, supportive wife he thought she was. But behind that calm face, she was no longer the same woman. She was preparing. Every kind gesture was just a cover while she quietly worked to protect herself. Her lawyer had told her exactly what to do. They spoke carefully, only through her private email and a prepaid phone she kept hidden in her closet. The lawyer explained how Sarah could secure her rights and freeze any accounts that used her name without permission. Together, they began to trace where her name appeared in Daniel's company record. The deeper they looked, the more shocking it became. Daniel hadn't just taken her off ownership. He had also used her name on several business contracts without telling her. He had signed her as a co-guarantor on loans and property leases, meaning if something went wrong, she'd be responsible too. Her trust had been his tool, and she hadn't even known it. Sarah spent her mornings gathering documents, scanning copies, and sending them to her lawyer before Daniel came home. She made sure everything was hidden: receipts, statements, files, all carefully organized in a small box under the sink behind old cleaning supplies. Every time she found something new, she felt her anger cool into something sharper. It wasn't just about his insult at dinner anymore. It was about years of manipulation. He had treated her like she was invisible, while quietly using her to build his empire. During dinners, Daniel bragged about new deals and upcoming projects, completely unaware that Sarah already knew more than he thought. She listened silently, nodding while memorizing every detail. He had no idea she was using his own arrogance to her advantage. The lawyer guided her through every step, helping her file for legal protection over her share of assets. By doing so, Daniel couldn't easily sell or move them again. It took time, patience, and calmness, things Sarah had learned well in her marriage. And though she acted the same on the outside, inside she was steadying herself for what was coming. At night, when the house was quiet, she would sit by the window, thinking about how everything had turned. Just a week ago, she had felt small and broken. Now, she was quietly taking back everything she had lost: her confidence, her control, and her future. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel's success had never been his alone. It was built on her ideas, her patience, and her trust. Without her, his foundation was weaker than he realized, and soon that weakness was going to show. Sarah didn't rush. She knew timing mattered, so she waited, calm, composed, and ready, while the man who once called her worthless unknowingly stood on the edge of his own downfall. Exactly 1 week after that dinner, the calm in their home broke. It started early in the morning when Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. He paced the kitchen, shouting into it, his face pale and tense. Sarah watched quietly from across the room while pretending to pour coffee. She didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. She already knew what was happening. By noon, his voice had turned sharp and panicked. He made call after call, slamming his laptop shut between them. His company had been hit with a sudden audit. The accounts were locked, transactions frozen, and partners were demanding answers. Every email that came in only seemed to make things worse. Sarah could hear his frustration growing with each passing hour. When he finally came home that evening, his temper exploded. He threw a stack of papers across the dining table, the pages scattering over the floor. "Do you have any idea what's happening?" he shouted. "Everything's falling apart. My accounts are frozen, my partners think I've been hiding things, and I don't even know where these legal notices are coming from." Sarah didn't move. She stood there, calm, holding her ground. For years, she had watched him lose his temper over small things: a late payment, a misplaced file, a wrong word. But now, watching him panic over something he couldn't control, she felt nothing but a quiet sense of clarity. Daniel continued pacing. "Someone's sabotaging me," he muttered, half to himself. "This can't just happen by accident." He looked at Sarah, searching for some kind of sympathy, but she only met his eyes and said, "Maybe it's just the truth catching up." He stopped. "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah walked past him, picking up the papers from the floor. "It means you built everything on lies, Daniel. And lies don't last forever." Her voice was soft, steady, not angry, just certain. He stared at her, confused and angry. "You think this is funny? You think I deserve this?" She looked at him, her face calm. "You called me worthless, remember? You said I didn't matter. So I decided to stop protecting. I stopped being your shield." The room went silent. For the first time, Daniel didn't have a response. He just stood there, trying to process her words. The woman he had mocked, ignored, and underestimated was the same woman who had been quietly holding everything together. Without her, his world was falling apart. He sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. The noise, the arrogance, the power, it was all gone. What remained was a man who realized too late that the person he had broken was the one keeping him standing. Sarah didn't smile. She didn't need to. She simply turned away, her steps steady, her voice calm as she said, "You always thought I was beneath you, Daniel. But now, you're standing in the ruins of your own making. And I'm finally free from it." That night, she slept peacefully for the first time in years, while Daniel stayed awake, staring into the darkness. The silence between them louder than any argument they'd ever had. The next morning, Daniel was a different man. The loud, confident tone was gone. His voice cracked when he spoke, and his eyes looked tired and desperate. He followed Sarah around the kitchen, trying to talk, his words tumbling over each other. "Sarah, please listen to me. I can fix this. Just talk to whoever you talk to. Tell them it was a mistake. We can start over. I'll make things right, I promise." Sarah didn't answer right away. She calmly poured cereal for the kids, her movements slow and steady. Emma and Luke sat at the table, quiet, sensing that something was wrong. They watched their parents carefully, unsure of what was happening but old enough to feel the tension in the room. Daniel tried again, stepping closer. "Sarah, please. I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was angry, stressed. I didn't mean any of it." His voice shook now, no longer filled with control. "You know me. You know I love you." Sarah turned to him, her face still calm. "Do you?" she asked softly. "Because the man who loves his wife doesn't tear her down in front of his children. He doesn't build his world on her trust and then call her worthless when he's standing on top of it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I messed up, okay? But we can fix this. I'll change. Just, please help me." For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him, not because she still loved him, but because she could see how lost he looked without control. For years, she had been his balance, his quiet support, the one who made his chaos make sense. Without her, he was unsteady, and now he knew it. "Daniel," she said, keeping her voice even, "I'm not doing this out of hate. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just done carrying the weight you put on me. I helped you build everything, and you built walls around me in return. I'm not fixing that anymore." He reached out, his voice breaking. "Please, Sarah, don't do this to me. Don't take everything away." She looked at him and then at their children, who were still watching silently. "I didn't take anything, Daniel," she said. "You gave it away the moment you decided I didn't matter." He went quiet then, his face pale, his body shaking slightly as he sat down at the table. The silence in the room felt heavier than before. The kids looked between them, confused, not fully understanding, but knowing something final had happened. Sarah knelt beside them and said gently, "It's okay, sweethearts. Everything's going to be fine." She smiled at them, not with joy but with peace. Then she stood up, looking at Daniel one last time. "You'll be fine too, eventually. But I'm not coming back to fix your mistakes this time." Daniel didn't argue. He just stared at her, realizing that her calm scared him more than her anger ever could. She wasn't fighting him anymore. She had already won by walking away. That night, the house was quiet in a way Sarah had never heard before. Daniel was upstairs packing his bags, moving quickly, muttering under his breath. She didn't follow him or ask where he was going. She already knew. He had called one of his old friends earlier, asking if he could stay there for a few days. The sound of drawers opening and closing echoed through the house, mixed with the dull thud of footsteps and zippers. Sarah stayed downstairs, leaning against the counter, listening without emotion. For years, the idea of Daniel leaving had terrified her. She used to imagine what it would be like, the pain, the chaos, the tears. But now, as it was actually happening, she felt something completely different. Stillness. Relief. When Daniel finally came down, his suitcase in one hand and phone in the other, he paused by the doorway. "I'll come back for the rest later," he said quietly, not looking at her. His voice was flat, stripped of all pride. Sarah nodded once. "Take your time," she replied. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. It felt strange. After 10 years of shared life, of promises and arguments, it was ending without a fight. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. Then he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. The sound of the door clicking shut was the final note of their story. Sarah stood there for a long time, staring at the space he had just left. She waited to feel the sadness she thought would come, but it didn't. Instead, she felt lighter, as if someone had lifted a heavy weight from her shoulder. She walked slowly through the house, passing the living room, the kitchen, the stairs. Everything was quiet, almost peaceful. In the living room, she stopped. The couch where they had spent countless evenings, arguing, pretending, existing side by side without connection, looked different now. Empty, but not lonely. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down, curling her legs beneath her. The silence around her was no longer uncomfortable. It was freedom. She looked at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall. Two smiling faces, full of hope and love. It felt like a picture of strangers. She didn't hate that memory anymore, but she no longer belonged to it. That version of her, the woman who kept forgiving, kept fixing, kept believing, was gone. Sarah took a deep breath and leaned back, feeling a calm she hadn't known in years. The air felt clearer, the space felt hers. She didn't cry, not even once. There was nothing left to grieve for. Upstairs, Daniel's closet stood half empty, and the echo of his voice was already fading from the walls. The house that once felt like a prison now felt like a beginning. For the first time in a long time, Sarah smiled, not because she had won, but because she was finally free. In the weeks that followed, everything Daniel had built started to crumble. It began with rumors spreading in his business circle. Clients who once trusted him stopped taking his calls. Partners pulled their money out without warning. By the end of the month, his company was no longer functioning. Offices that once buzzed with people and meetings now stood quiet, with unpaid bills stacked on desks and lawyers waiting at his door. Sarah didn't watch it happen closely, but she heard enough. The news reached her through whispers from mutual friends and short messages from people who didn't know the full story. Daniel's company was under investigation. His accounts were frozen again, and several lawsuits had been filed against him by former partners. The empire he had bragged about, the one he said she had nothing to do with, had fallen apart completely. She didn't feel joy in seeing him fail. What she felt was peace, the kind that comes when justice happens on its own. She had already let go of anger. She didn't need revenge anymore. She just wanted to live her own life, on her own terms. With Daniel gone and the house quiet, Sarah started focusing on herself for the first time in years. She dusted off her old portfolio from college, the one filled with sketches and ideas from when she studied interior design. It had been a dream she had put away when she married Daniel, promising herself she would return to it someday. That someday had finally come. She began taking small projects, helping neighbors redecorate their living rooms, giving advice on color palettes and furniture layouts. Word spread quickly, and soon she was getting more calls than she expected. She named her business Emma and Luke Designs, after her children. It wasn't big, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture she arranged, every wall she painted, gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her mornings became filled with light and quiet music instead of arguments and tension. She dropped the kids at school, worked from home, and made dinner in peace. There was no more walking on eggshells, no more pretending everything was fine. She was building something real this time, something honest. Occasionally, she'd get a call from someone who mentioned Daniel. He was still in town, trying to fix what was left of his business, but no one trusted him anymore. His name had become a warning instead of a symbol of success. Sarah didn't speak badly about him. She simply said, "I wish him well," and moved on. Months passed, and life found a new rhythm. She wasn't rich, but she didn't need to be. The peace she felt was worth more than anything money could buy. She had her freedom, her children, and her work, 3 things Daniel could never take away. Every time she saw her company name written on a new project file, she smiled quietly. What Daniel had tried to erase, she rebuilt. Not with anger, but with strength. And this time, it was all hers. It had been several quiet months since Daniel walked out of the house that night. Sarah's life had settled into something peaceful, steady, and real. Her small design business was growing faster than she expected. Clients loved her work, and her reputation for being calm, honest, and creative started to spread. Emma and Luke were happier too. They laughed more, talked freely, and the tension that used to hang in the air had completely disappeared. Then one evening, as the sun was setting, there was a knock on the door. When Sarah opened it, she froze for a moment. It was Daniel. He looked nothing like the man she once knew. His expensive suits were gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his face tired, and his eyes hollow. He held a folder in his hand, but it hung loosely, as if he no longer had the strength to care about it. For a long second, neither of them spoke. The wind blew softly, and Sarah could hear the faint laughter of her children playing in the backyard. Daniel finally broke the silence. "You destroyed me," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "Everything I had is gone." Sarah looked at him steadily, not with anger but with clarity. There was no hate left in her heart, just truth. "No, Daniel," she said calmly. "You destroyed yourself the night you called me worthless." He didn't respond. His lips trembled slightly, and his eyes filled with shame. For the first time, he had no defense, no excuse, no arrogance to hide behind. The silence between them was heavy, but it didn't hurt Sarah anymore. It was just the sound of something ending, for good this time. Daniel looked around, maybe expecting her to pity him or invite him in. But she didn't. That part of her life was over. She had given him years of support, patience, and love, and he had used it all carelessly. Now she owed him nothing. I hope you find peace, she said softly, but it won't be here. Then she closed the door. For a moment she stood there, her hand on the doorknob, listening to the quiet. She didn't feel triumphant or proud. What she felt was relief, the kind that comes when you finally let go of someone who no longer belongs in your story. She walked back to the living room, where the house smelled of dinner and candles. Her kids ran to her, laughing, and she smiled. Life had become gentle again. She sat on the couch, watching them, realizing how far she'd come. Not just from Daniel, but from the version of herself who once believed his words. That night, as she looked around the home she had rebuilt on her own, Sarah understood something deeply. Revenge doesn't always need shouting or destruction. Sometimes it's as quiet as peace. Sometimes it's walking away with your dignity, your freedom, and your heart still whole. And that, she thought, was the sweetest revenge of all.